After 150 hours of gameplay, I have fully beaten the main story and defeated all 75 bosses. Some were easy, some were very hard, and some were just annoying. In this video, I wanted to focus only on the 10 hardest main story bosses. This is my personal opinion based on how many times I had to restart the fight, how long the fight took, and how mechanically difficult it was. If you haven't finished the story and don't want some of the endgame fights spoiled, click away. Number 10. Reed Devil before the nerfs. Since I beat Reed Devil before it was nerfed, I had to base my experience on that one fight. At that time, I still didn't really know what I was doing. I was getting used to wonky controls, movement and camera, so that only made it worse. Phase 1 was relatively fine as he was doing fast attacks with constant teleporting, but once I was able to get a perfect parry or turning slash to counter him, the damage followed up. I was able to out-heal most of his Phase 1 attacks, but Phase 2 made it slightly tricky. He started off several copies of himself and I had to destroy 4 totems. The wonky controls, movement and targeting made this quite difficult for one of the early boss fights, especially since on top of that, there are copies of the boss attacking and staggering you the whole time. Phase 2 was just more of Phase 1 except he adds a powerful dashing move, but once I figured out his patterns, I was able to perfect parry most of his teleporting attacks. Number 9. Master Do. This is a Chapter 9 boss, which means at this point the difficulty of the bosses is higher, but also your own gear and skill is higher. It has 2 phases and throughout whole Phase 1, the boss repeats the same attacks which can all be perfectly parried, especially if you cheese it with focus mode and slow motion. In Phase 2, the boss has 3 special moves which can one-shot you. First is dashing around the pillars, which can easily be avoided using focus and dodging at the last second before he dashes on you. The second is blinding flash finisher, which will one-shot you if you get stunned, and third is the laser that shoots out very fast. I died from the laser a few times and I couldn't find a good way to dodge it. Overall, if you can perfect parry his normal attacks to then deal damage while dodging the special attack, it will be relatively easy considering you should be decently geared by then. Number 8. Crowcaller. This is Chapter 5 boss, which is still relatively early in the game. The boss was more annoying to fight rather than being difficult. It has 3 phases and while he repeats most of his attacks and special moves in all 3 phases, what made it annoying was the constant teleporting, flying around and keeping distance. It was difficult for me to get close and deal any significant damage. Across all 3 phases I wasn't able to fully fill up the stagger bar once. I didn't die once, but I had to waste a lot of food because I wasn't able to parry any of his attacks, and my gear kinda sucked at that point. In Phase 3 there are also random crows that attack and stagger your animation, so that makes it even more annoying. Overall, not so mechanically difficult, but it did take me around 20 minutes to beat him without retrying. Number 7. Karush the Slayer before the nerfs. If to this point you thought Crimson Desert bosses are easy, Karush is going to humble you real hard, especially if you fought them before the nerfs like I did. This is still a relatively early game boss that has 3 phases and honestly made me want to quit the game. Phase 1 was pretty chill, just having to dodge his slams. I couldn't find good timing to parry those slams, so I kept dodge rolling. His one special attack is a combination of very slam fast into the ground slam, but luckily if you run and hide behind this wall, the boss will not hit you. Phase 2 is more of the same except he adds this jump attack where he climbs on a wall and jumps down. Easily dodgeable by just hiding behind any pillar. Phase 3 is everything combined, but he does the attacks more often and giving you less time to deal damage. Overall, what made this boss difficult was his special attack, and without the cheese hiding spot, the boss would probably be the top 3 hardest bosses for me. Number 6. Mjordin. A Chapter 7 boss that has 2 phases. The boss applies constant pressure with relentless attacks, giving you very little room to deal damage unless you can perfect parry. This was unfortunately still the time when I didn't know that parrying is the best way to deal damage, so I wasn't even using the block skill, only dodge roll, which made this boss probably more difficult than it was supposed to be. I didn't manage to fill up his stagger bar once in both phases due to the limited amount of attacks I was doing, and the whole fight also took about a good 15 minutes. In Phase 2 the boss becomes Lava Mjordin with enhanced fire attacks, but it was very manageable. I defeated the boss on the first try, but I did spend quite a lot of food. I was decently geared for this fight, probably even overgeared, but I simply wasn't skilled enough to combine my attacks and perfect parry, which made the boss unnecessarily somewhat difficult. Number 5, Hex Marie. A chapter 9 boss with 2 phases that made me pull out hair out of frustration. Supposedly a very easy boss if you nullify her gimmick with your skills. What made it frustrating was that it kept teleporting away every time I got in close for a melee combo. She shoots ranged projectiles all the time, summons ranged and melee adds, and does a melee combo occasionally that I assume can be parried, which I of course never did. The gimmick is that you're supposed to use Nature's Snare to gather all the projectiles and shoot back at her, while using Focus plus Unleash ability to push away adds. Every time you block the projectiles, there's a pretty long window to deal damage. But honestly, who figures that out in the heat of a moment? I kept running around the tree, dodging projectiles and chasing her down for a good 25 minutes. Would this boss be easier if I countered it the way the developers designed it? Probably. But I guess after all, I did it my way, which felt more rewarding. Number 4, Lucian Bastyr. A chapter 8 boss with 2 phases. The boss is as difficult and annoying as bosses get, and it didn't get help that you had to fight them as a Damien. Phase 1 was still relatively chill, but Phase 2, oh my god. Aside from constant teleporting and fast attacks, every single attack the boss did also summoned a shadow copy. So every time you think there is a window to deal damage, nope, a shadow clone spawns behind you outside of your vision cone because camera positioning sucks and you get interrupted mid-animation. Playing as Damien for the first time, getting used to Cliff's combos and moveset isn't even the worst part because I made it even more difficult by not even resetting my skills and upgrading them for Damien. She had 0 skills and I spent 20 minutes chipping the boss with the most basic attacks while spamming dodge rolls and eating food. The boss would be difficult enough with Cliff, but I guess the game is like, here, you have played 50 hours with Cliff, you have learned all the combos, you're getting good at the game, have this annoying boss that spawns shadow clones and fight it with a completely new character you have never played. But yet again, I did it my way, the hard way. Number 3, Muradin Final Boss Fight. This is the final boss of the main story, so if you don't want the fight spoiled, skip this part. Up to this point, I have spent quite a good amount of time doing side content, upgrading gear, cooking a lot of food. I have gotten to the point where I was able to perfect parry without going into slow-mo focus mode and I learned my combos. But still, the fight was difficult. Difficult in a sense that I literally had to go full focus mode, pay attention to what the boss was doing, understand what I can parry and what I have to dodge. I died a few times because even with high upgraded gear and a lot of defense, the boss would still kill me with 2 attacks if I didn't dodge or block. The gear helped because when I had the opportunity I was able to deal a lot of damage and stagger him quite often. Phase 2 was also pretty crazy where the boss had multiple attacks at one shot and I had to use revive pills and a lot of food. Phase 3, while very cool, it was pretty underwhelming for a final boss. You sit on a dragon, shoot fireballs at the eye, when the stagger bar fills up, glide to the eye, nature palm it to deal half HP damage, repeat one more time and you beat it. Overall, this is a very difficult encounter if you come unprepared. Number 2, Ludwig. This is chapter 7 boss that has 2 phases. But hear me out. I don't know what I was doing wrong and why I couldn't beat this boss, but I have spent over 2 hours trying to beat this boss. Even phase 1 gave me so much trouble to the point where I was finally able to get to phase 2, I died instantly. It got to the point where I stopped trying to beat the boss and I went out to do side content for the next few hours trying to upgrade my gear and bring as much food as possible. While this helped, I was still struggling very hard even on phase 1. I couldn't hit perfect parries, I kept getting stunned by the lightning attacks. In both phases, the boss would move so fast and do so many lightning attacks everywhere, I honestly thought I was never going to beat it. Maybe there was a gimmick I was supposed to do, maybe I was supposed to bring lightning resistance gear, but I refused to watch a guide or learn anything about it. I wanted to do it the hardest way possible, by hitting my head up against the wall and doing the same thing over and over expecting different results. Some might call me crazy, but eventually it did work. Over 3 hours overall spent on this boss alone, and literally hundreds of food used and I was able to beat it. What a relief, only to find out in a cutscene that the boss escapes and I was going to have to fight him again. Number 1, Corrupted Caliburn. This is the first part of the final boss fight, so if you don't want this fight spoiled, skip. This boss has everything: fast attacks, teleporting around, summoning shadow clones that attack from outside of the vision cone, projectiles, and across all 3 phases it took me about an hour and a half to beat it. I was prepared as much as you can be for the final fight. Gear upgraded, hundreds of food, enough skill where I was able to perfect parry, and after a few tries I understood what I can parry and what I have to dodge. Every time I was given a window to deal damage, I took full advantage with my combos, and while HP bar wasn't getting lower that much, this was the highest damage I was able to do. This was one of very few bosses where I had to use revive pills, as dying in phase 3 and having to retry was just out of the question. I'll be honest, it took me less time and effort to beat Bellot and Forgotten General than it did on Caliburn, with the same gear. Once you get to this main story boss you will understand. Maybe it was just me and my playstyle that made it difficult, so your experience might be different. And this concludes the 10 hardest main story bosses list. I also plan on doing 10 hardest open world bosses, as I did beat them all, so please let me know in the comments what would your top 10 hardest bosses in Crimson Desert be and why. I'd love to see how different our opinions are. In any case, thank you for watching, consider subscribing, and I'll catch you in the next one.